Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. A special guest on this episode, as is every guest, a special guest, isn't it? David Walker is joining us today, someone I really align with and resonate with all of his insights, his wisdom, his knowledge, his background, his experience. David has a military background, went to West Point, and it served him super well leadership-wise and discipline, diligence, dedication-wise. Whereas he's been a part of 8 businesses, 7 being hedge funds, and has his own hedge fund now with his partner where he went to West Point with, actually, called Growthline Capital. In this episode, we talk a lot about growth curves, the curve that actually got him to buy into Growthline Capital when he started his own venture. Talk a lot about leadership, books, culture within businesses. And David is someone who can talk on such things because he's been through it. He's an operator, an operational guy. He gets it done. GSD, right, David? But if you're listening, you'll know why that was, why I said that, and everything in this episode. It brings so much to light. So thank you for joining. Appreciate you, and I will see you very soon.
I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
First place I did want to start, and David, I do appreciate you coming on to talk.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover, but I wanted to read something which shows like the breadth of leadership you had when you were in the military, and cross it over to what you're doing now with the hedge fund. But a 500-man foreign military and paramilitary force you've led before, 650-soldier airborne infantry battalion at 1.2, and now you're a co-founder and a COO at a hedge fund of your own. I read that off because like it shows the amount of people that one has to manage, but like the intensity of such a thing, and you've been through it. So like, what are the crossovers in the leadership between doing in the military and now hedge fund within business? Like, is there some like common traits that apply to both that you've seen since you lived through it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for clarification, I was in a 650-man battalion as a leader, but I led a Green Beret, a ODA, which is a 12-man special forces team, and we would go and we would work with indigenous forces up to and including 500 man. And the challenge behind that, to be honest with you, when you're leading your team and leading, about 500, a couple hundred to 500. Indigenous forces is not only do you have a lot of people under your command, but you also have language barriers and cultural barriers, weapons barriers, traditional barriers, all kinds of different religious barriers, perhaps that you may not be aware of. And so a lot of things you have to take into consideration. And so the leadership is even more, in my opinion, even more challenging, even with the language barriers. So when we went overseas and we were working with different forces overseas, either in training or in operations, we'd have to really, really study up ahead of time and learn their traditions and whatnot. And the smallest little mistake could be actually quite magnified when you were overseas. And the same thing when you were, now that we're running a hedge fund, the team is a lot smaller, but a small mistake could actually be, could be magnified, quite a lot. And so we have to have a very good attention to detail. For example, when we were in the Middle East, you may know some certain traditions. For example, showing the bottom of your feet. We cross our legs in America all the time when we're sitting, and our bottom of our foot might be towards another person. It means nothing, but over there, it's actually an insult. So little things like that you have to be very, very aware of, and also like showing face and making sure you're. If you're disagreeing with somebody, you're doing it in a very, very sensitive manner, because here we can disagree about, hedge fund positions and what we're buying and selling. And we just have a lively debate around that. Whereas it's not as easy in certain other cultures and whatnot. And so not only did I have to pay attention to that when I was working with commanders overseas, but I had to make sure my men were trained It's 12-man Special Forces ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha. But I had to make sure that they were also very sensitive because they have dozens and dozens of soldiers altogether. Like I said, probably about 400 or 500, depending on the operation. And we all have to be very, very sensitive and very kind of culturally aware that a small discrepancy or mistake can be magnified. And kind of that sort of type of training of that sort of attention to detail, I think I brought across, and that leadership sort of component into my financial career and that attention to detail. And I think that has paid off very well in either working for large hedge funds or starting my own with a good buddy of mine, a good friend of mine from the military also.
Yeah. On that point, you've been a part of like, I believe it was like close to 8 businesses and like 7 being hedge funds. Like now you have your own, right? It's like, what have you seen? Is it the same exact thing? Like the importance of the attention to detail when it comes to hedge funds? Like what have you seen be the most important when it comes to managing such high level investments, which can be like rather stressful?
Yeah, absolutely. And so each one was slightly different, and there are some things that crossed over. But as I was working my way up in my career, it was kind of funny. I got a job at a hedge fund. I was kind of very lucky, had an opportunity to interview with a bunch of other folks in a fund that was a very large fund, multi-billion, multi-strat fund. And it was a great place to learn. I worked directly for the COO there. And so I just kind of cut my teeth by learning all the different strategies and all the different operations behind a hedge fund. And then I got recruited away to become a director of operations at a hedge fund. And then a couple of years later, got recruited away again to be a chief operating officer of a large hedge fund. So I got to progress in my career and learn more and more as I moved up, so to speak. But I would say that the most important aspect of all funds is the people. It really comes down to the people and the culture, and that can be driven. That's really driven by the leaders of the organization, and that's pretty much in any organization. And so the culture of some funds that I was at was a little bit difficult, to be honest with you. And the culture of other funds, I could tell the leadership was really big and really caring. And these are funds with sometimes 50 or it grew to like about a little over 100 people, 4 offices worldwide. It becomes a little bit more difficult to manage that culture and manage all those people. And that's why it's very important to have good leaders at the top that can have that good understanding. Because if you want good work done all throughout the organization, it really comes down to how much that leader cares about his people, sets the tone, develops the culture, and creates that path and that vision so that the strategy of the overall firm can be actually realized by the people who are developing and pushing that strategy forward. And so I really think it came down to the leadership. And I was very fortunate to work for some very good leaders, both in the military. My leaders were amazing. Like I learned so much from the leaders that I worked for in the military. I was very blessed in my career, in my military career, the 82nd Airborne Division, 3rd Ranger Battalion, and 5th Special Force Group. My leaders were amazing. And also had some very good leaders also in my hedge fund career. I guess I was just kind of fortunate. Some were a little bit more challenging than the others, a little bit more different in their leadership styles, but overall, very, very good people who cared about their people and who set the tone of what they wanted their organization to be like and how they wanted to implement their strategy by their leadership. So I've been very blessed. I've heard stories out there. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble on, but of folks working for some firms that the leaders weren't as caring, didn't kind of dictate that and set the culture in a good enough manner where there was kind of an internal opposition that brewed, and that's never what you want to see in any organization. So
I love all that because it's I have a book behind me. It's Principles. Do you know Ray Dalio?
Oh, I love reading his stuff. Yeah, I have his book too and his synopsis and yeah, they're very good.
Yeah, well, like one of the biggest hedge funds in the world, and like he talks about people and culture as like the 2 driving gears, right, to everything.
Sure.
He talks about it.
And
so
you know what? A good friend of mine actually is a very high level leader up there, David McCormick. And
wow, at Bridgewater Associates.
That's correct. I think he's the president of Bridgewater. He's like number 2, I guess, after Ray. I don't know if Ray's still involved in the organization or kind of semi-removed, but I think you would like to interview him because he is a very brilliant guy and a great leader. Talk about a guy who knows how to lead. He was in government, he was in private, and he's another West Point guy. That's why I know him. And if you like, we can talk offline
Yeah,
later. I think you should email him, and I'm happy to set that up. And I think an interview with David would be very worthwhile to talk about his leadership skills and what they do up there, and also what he's done before in the military, and also working for government.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot, seriously.
Yeah.
But on that point of West Point you brought up, you did go there. I was close to having an experience in going there, but that is one of the most rigorous academies there is. Like, does it live up to its hype when, you go in, it's like they kind of they throw you in the water without a life vest and you got to learn how to swim?
It's basically it. And that, to be quite honest with you, it really prepared me well for my my hedge fund career, because the first fund I was at, even though I worked for a really great COO, it was a little trial by fire. It was really, and it was a lot by that. We had a guy quit who joined a few months after me. He quit after like a couple of weeks. It was like I said, it was a tough place, but it was a fair place, but you had to figure it out. And so back to the West Point example, and I was kind of fortunate that I was already an enlisted man in the military, and I joined the military to get the college fund, and I did very well in the military. I was honor grad in basic training, honor grad in AIT. I maxed the PT test. I won numerous awards. I was in my battalion, and so a lot of the officers came up to me and said, "Hey, you should continue your military career, not get out and go to college, but you should continue your military career and maybe go to West Point and try out for that and apply to that." And I did, and I got accepted. So I was very fortunate. But so it was funny because, I worked up my military career to a rank of E5. And then when I went to West Point, I had to start all over again. I was down at the bottom. So a few times in your career, you work up and then go to the bottom, and work up and go to your bottom. So it's kind of funny. We have to start all over again, almost like starting a new hedge fund. Now we have to go to the bottom. We have to start again and build it up. So I'm kind of used to doing that. It's almost funny. But West Point was very rigorous. But like I said, I'd come from a very disciplined family. My dad was Hungarian and my mom was Italian, so there was a lot of discipline in our family. So I was used to it. I think that's why I excelled in basic training, and also at West Point I excelled there because I was kind of used to the kind of a rigorous culture, where some people were not so much used to it. And we had folks quitting in anywhere from 3 days to a couple of weeks in, and I managed to do not only make it through, but I think I excelled at West Point. I had a high duty position, and I also I did well academically and physically, and overall my cadet rank I was near the top 10% of my class.
Wow, that's incredible. And like, to everything you went through, I would love to know, because I'm big on stories.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the most like stressful? It can be military or hedge fund related, like stressful experiences you went through that really tested, like, am I practicing for a reason if I can do this stuff?
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm wondering if I had more stress in the military. I mean, we had some deployments, and I was never in harm's way as much. We had only one little one in '98 called Desert Fox. It was like a 3-day skirmish, and it wasn't nearly what these guys had gone through post 9/11. The guys who were deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, and I have so much respect for them. So, but listen, I started another fund with a friend of mine who was at Tudor. And he came out at a great track record. We raised about 160. I think we raised 160 total, all in, something of that extent. Unfortunately, the fund just couldn't put up the numbers that would keep us in business, so we had to shut it down. That was a little bit of a stressful situation for me, and it was difficult to handle because of a number of things. Obviously, it was our baby. A friend of mine and I had grown it from nothing. It was two guys and an idea on a napkin, so to speak. But we had employees too, and I felt very bad that we unfortunately had to close it down and let them go. We cared a lot. They were good people who we knew personally, and it was a bit difficult to kind of have to send them on their way, so to speak. And we try to give them as much severance and introduce them to people that we knew in the industry so that they could get jobs and whatnot. But it was a challenge. I'm not sure if that was the most stressful situation I had, but it was probably a little bit more recent. So probably has some recency bias, recent meaning of about 10 years ago. But it was difficult because we had to shut down the fund, learned how to start a hedge fund, learned how to shut down a fund. You never want to do the latter. But it was a challenging time because we had to let some people go who were counting on us for their income and their jobs and whatnot. They all got great jobs afterwards, and they're doing fantastic.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, no easy thing, and you learn a lot through that. But then you've started up Growthline Capital now. So did you was there a moment of reflecting through that after it happened to why did this occur the way it did? And now you're starting another one and it's going to be way better based on the learnings you have and just 10 more years of experience, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. I don't know who it was that said, I never lose. I always learn. So if I didn't gather a lot of lessons from it, then it wouldn't have been worth the experience. But I did. I gathered a lot of lessons from it, and I'm applying those now. But I tell you, one of the funny lessons I learned from it was I'll never start a hedge fund again. And I literally told myself, and here I am. But and I'll tell you the story behind why I'm here. But so I went to work, got a great job at a really great firm. Good guys, smart guys, took care of me. The firm grew, and a very small handful of people, literally 5 folks. It's a little bit bigger now, but when I was there, it grew from about 800 to over $1 billion, all close to $2 billion. And again, but very smart guys and good guys, and they took care of me. And I said, this is a great, you could just sit here and continue on and have a good life. But my brain doesn't kind of work like that. I always looked at having a job as something I did between entrepreneurial aspirations. So literally almost like the first day on the job, I'm like, okay, when's my next, build up some income, and when's my next thing? And I didn't want to jump quickly and off just crazily. And I developed some apps with a friend of mine years ago, and we got those on the App Store and stuff like that. Never really took off. We had an A round or early seed round and an A round that was coming, but the market conditions weren't ripe, and a competitor, we watched a competitor who was much larger than us kind of do the exact same thing to their app to make it almost exclusively. I was like, wow, that was the day I knew we were done. Anyway, so I was waiting patiently for something, and Mark, my good friend and classmate at West Point, he came to me and said, hey, Dave, let's meet for lunch. I have an idea. And he was at Goldman running like $7 billion as a portfolio manager at Goldman with a great track record. He went over to Jennison, the same shop that Kathy Wood was at for many years, and they were both trained by a great growth investor named Sig Segalis at Jennison. Mark was there for 10, Mark Shatton, my classmate at West Point, ran a bunch of billions of dollars, was co-manager of the big flagship fund there. So a great track record, great experience. And he came to me, we were having dinner, and he said, Dave, I have an idea. I want to start a hedge fund. And I said, Mark, that's a terrible idea. Why would you want to ruin your life? Trust me, I've been through it. You're having a Jerry Maguire moment. Go home to your wife and kids. Trust me, you have a great job, one of the best jobs on Wall Street, paid enormously well. Like, you was making great money. I'm like, what do you think? So off he went. 6 months later, he said, let's meet up for dinner. We met up for dinner. He said, I'm thinking about starting a hedge fund. Here's why. He kind of gave me a quick synopsis, but not the super in-depth. I said, that's a terrible idea. Go home to your wife and kids. Third time, he came to me. And I said, well, listen, man, I can tell you want to do this. So give me your reason why. Okay. Cause I know I can't talk you off the ledge here. Apparently you're going to jump. And he's explained to me his philosophy, and Mark is a really smart guy. And I didn't really know how smart. And then he said to me, Dave, this is how I see the world. And he explained to me, I can give you a quick synopsis of it if you want, but he sees the world as a growth investor through a unique lens. And I sat there and I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God. Because it's so unique and so different, and it was so successful, and it still is very successful, that I was like, wow, this is it. This is the one I was waiting for, because I was just like, making good money, and I had multi-billion-dollar hedge fund as a CEO. Why would I want to leave? I was like, wow, this is the one I was waiting for. And this was like maybe end of 2017 or 2018. But I was like, okay, wait, here's how he said, like, I know nothing about how to put these together. I said, well, I know a lot of how to put them together. I worked for small firms. I worked for my own hedge funds.
You guys matched well? Like, you matched up well, both of you?
We matched up very well. I don't pick, if I'm picking investments, we're in trouble. If he's doing the compliance and the operations and the trade and all that back office stuff, we're in trouble. So we were matched up perfectly. And I said, wow, this is very unique. I said, listen, if you're going to ruin your life, I can't let you do it alone. I'll join you. But I really, it was kind of a joking sort of thing that he was going to do this. He was going to find somebody. And so I was a very good match for him. But the way he looked at the world was so unique and so different through a lens of a growth investor. And I'm happy to explain to you his thought patterns, because he even wrote a white paper on growth and growth investing that I think is very unique and very awesome. And, we've got some good investors. We've been managing the growth of the firm very slowly and methodically. But sure enough, we quit our jobs in 2018 and launched the fund in early 2019. So
wow.
There we are. That's Growthline for you in a nutshell.
That's incredible. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Seriously. I would love to know, yeah, what is his philosophy? Since he had, I mean, he had to manage an insane amount of capital under bigger companies. Yeah, he had to develop such a great philosophy.
He did, and he showed me this. He pulled because I said, "Listen." He showed me this little thing he scratched together, and he said, "I scratched this together when I was at Goldman. This is how I look at the world." And it was really, I'd love for you to chat with him because he can do a much better job of explaining. He said, "Listen, Dave, companies that grow through this thing called the growth curve. You've seen it 100 times. It's called the S curve or the growth curve. Coca-Cola took 100 years to go up this curve. Facebook, 10, right? So companies now can grow up this growth curve much faster, and they can compound and grow in size much faster than years and years and years ago. Not only technology companies, but all kinds. There's growth everywhere. There's growth in online gaming. There's growth in electric vehicles. There's growth in alternative energy, hydrogen. There's growth in cannabis. There's growth in all these in pharmaceuticals and biotech. There's amazing growth, just amazing. And these companies in consumer discretionary, a company I drink the product that we invest in, it's so good. They're like they're the next Monster beverage, and they go up this growth curve where they're all fighting to become the next something, and it's going to be huge. If the winner gets there, it's going to be huge. So Mark looks at the world. He says, Dave, I look at these incredible trends. So first he starts with these he calls them mega trends, these multi-billion / trillion-dollar mega trends. And he tries to understand, are they real or just a fad, right? Is this a mega trend that's real? Electric vehicles, that is a real trend. We all kind of get it now. But 10 years ago, it was kind of like, we don't know. Is it a mega trend or is it just some weird guy named Musk that's putting together? It's a trend and it's here to stay.
Yeah.
Hydrogen fuel cells, things of that nature. So he looks at these mega trends and he tries to figure out the TAM, the total addressable market. Is it hundreds of billions of dollars, or is it trillions of dollars, or is it just kind of a little niche thing that somebody's going to own? They're going to make a little bit of money and that's about it. So once he understands the TAM, the total addressable market, he sees the technology, brings it back, might be tech, might be in any places. And he looks at all the companies that are fighting it out to win a piece of that. And what are they going to look like? Who are the winners going to be and what are they going to look like when they get there? And then he models those out. We have an analyst who helps him do models. We do financial models just like everybody else. And he models it out 3 to 5 years. And he looks at that, what these companies compete. So, how big is the TAM? What is it? What's the size of the prize, so to speak? And what do the winners get when they get there? And then who are the people fighting it out to get there? And he's kind of cut the growth curve into 3 areas. Well, so some people see growth in terms of sectors, technology, consumer discretionary, communication services, things of this nature. Well, he sees the growth curve in this direction instead of this direction. And that's where I kind of had this weird epiphany, if I don't join this guy, I'm missing an amazing opportunity, right? So he looks at the growth curve through maturing growth. These are companies that have already captured a meaningful piece of the growth curve, right? So they've already, quote unquote, the 1 or 2 players that own their space, but are still compounding at significant rates. So these big companies like the Googles of the world, Amazon, Facebook, they own their TAM, but they're still compounding very, very, very well. Then he calls it a next segment, the middle segment, kind of on the growth curve, like right in that inflection point. He calls those next segment emerging growth. So these are where the TAM is known, but the winner still of the companies who are still fighting out is unknown. So we know the TAM is huge, but the winners we don't really know of. And then the last part, he calls it venture growth. It's not venture capital, still publicly traded companies. The TAM is unknown, they know it's going to be, they don't really know the size of it. They don't know the size of the prize. It could be huge. And they also don't know who's going to win. So if he had to break down, he balances his portfolio, basically about 40% of the mature growth, about 40% in the emerging growth, and about 20% in the venture growth because of the risk is a little bit more, although those can be hunter baggers. And there's a great book written by a friend of ours called Hunter Baggers, Chris Mayer. And it's a great book. I would encourage you to read it. It's basically an updated version of Thomas Phelps' book, 100 to 1 in the Market, of these companies that if you get it right, that become 100x of their current size. Amazon became 100x, Monster Beverage, 100x. So if you bought it for $2, eventually down the line, you might have to wait a long, long time and you might have to go through a lot of volatility, but they eventually become, $200 if you bought it at $2. And the key thing that Mark does that's a little bit different than some growth investors is he manages that path along the way. So he cares about the destination, what it's going to look like when it gets there, but he's not willing to eat an enormous amount of volatility getting there. So he manages those positions by maybe either adding, or subtracting to it, or the exposure to it, or hedging, or et cetera, on the way to that goal, so to speak. And when I heard this idea and this concept, I thought it was quite fascinating to me, and I knew that he was onto something very unique. I don't know anyone, name one person who's looking at the world through that lens. I can't name one. And his track record shows it at Goldman and also at Jennison, that he's been very successful managing these portfolios of growth for 18 years now.
Wow.
So that's kind of the growth line story.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And to a layperson who doesn't know what growth curve means now, is fully educated on that.
Yeah. You should Google it because it's really cool. You'll find one if you just go growth curve and then just go to images.
Yeah, well,
there's one with multiple ones on there. They have the radio, the television, the VCR, the refrigerator, the automobile. They're all, nobody like, what is this stupid newfangled technology? Some new person, the early adopters and the innovators. Then everyone says, wow, this is pretty cool. Then everybody has one like these. Already up at the end of the curve, right? But years ago, it was like, hey, you see some people walking around with a cell phone and they're awfully loud talking in the street. You're like, they kind of annoy you. You don't remember. You were too young, but I remember nobody had this. So and now everybody.
Some companies do an amazing job where they prolong that maturity. And it's just like they keep
milking that cash cow. Amazon, Apple and Amazon, they're very good. And Apple's a great example, but they also kind of continue to innovate. So you can look at that. We have a good slide that kind of points out some companies are very smart so the Apple came out, with the computer, then they're the iPhone and the iPad and the iWatch, and they're very smart on their innovation. They continue to innovate. A lot of large companies can't do that. They go up to the growth curve one time, and then they start dying, and they get beat up by somebody else behind them who has a new technology. And the technology doesn't have to be in tech. It could be in consumer discretionary or just a new product, new business model, new way of doing business. And they end up destroying that. And believe it or not, sometimes we find good shorts into with these mature companies that cannot continue to innovate. Innovation is what spurs the economy. It makes America, that's why America is so great. We may not be able to out-manufacture, out-produce. We can out-innovate anyone. I will put us up against anyone in the world, America against anyone in the world in terms of innovation. Now, there's some other ones that are out there that are pretty darn good too. But America is just known for our innovation. And that's why our economy continues to be so strong, the innovators of the world. And it's funny because we have the rule of law that allows that and to encourage innovation, encourage entrepreneurs to take risks.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Entrepreneurship. It's like we empower, and we're built by a lot of those small garage companies that become huge.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to watch. I have a friend who I just invested a tiny little amount in his company. He developed this app, and he's getting some great momentum, and who knows where it could go. And it's just exciting to see that two guys in his room have built this app over the course of 8 months or so. And it's out there in the wild, so to speak, and people are interested in it and using it. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, 100%. I heard, you brought up a book, and I'm going to make sure to put all the books in the footnotes, but what is one or two, if you're limited to one, you can choose two, but what's your favorite book? It doesn't have to be with exactly hedge funds or exactly investing or exactly leadership, but something that's been a stake in the ground for you in learnings.
Yeah. It's so funny because I have it's probably about 8 books that are in my, these are I even put them to the side. These are my super favorite books. But I will tell you one that I give out as a present, believe it or not, to people. I'm that guy, that guy who gives out books at Christmas or holidays. I'm that guy.
That's my guy.
Not as exciting as Uncle so-and-so, Uncle Dave gave us a book. But anyway, it's a great book. There's a bunch of great books, but one of them I give out a lot. I give out Chris's book and a bunch of others. The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a short book.
Great book.
Maybe hundreds, but probably tens of millions have been sold. And I don't even remember the author, but I think it's a great little read. It's just a good little read. And it's a great read for young people. And because if you understand math, and you understand the compounding of interest, like the eighth wonder of the world. I think Einstein said that, or somebody said the compounding of interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Someone at my age, I got to compound at like 17% just to match somebody at your age who can compound at 7% because of the effect, the beautiful effect of compounding. I mean, that book covers it a little bit, but also covers other investment theories and theses, so to speak. And it does it in a very storytelling sort of manner that's easy to understand. And that's why you can give it to younger people, high school kids even. And so I think that's a good book that I recommend. There's a few others too, Marcus Aurelius Meditations, and a few others that I can.
Yeah, those are I'm Marcus Aurelius like Meditations. Yeah, that's a good one though. I like that.
Those are good too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the one thing we did pass over was that I know you do the COO work. You're an operational guy at Growthline Capital at your hedge fund, but you've done a lot of operational work with the hedge funds you've been a part of. Like you've been in the military, so it's very operational intensive. You did study engineering. Like, what did you learn about the importance of systems? Because I even think, right, the best designers in the world, best creatives are actually the ones who are they're very disciplined in a certain way. They're very like system oriented. Like you have to think in a scientific way to build good products or design good things. So a lot of it does come down to the basis of system design and having good processes. But what did engineering, did that give you anything in relation to your COO skills and stuff?
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. And I was very fortunate at West Point. West Point's an engineering school, so everyone's taking engineering whether you like it or not. I was kind of on the civil track, but I did take a couple systems engineering classes, and I actually wish I would have done more in systems engineering because you learn a lot. You learn about how one thing can affect other things. You do Gantt charts and things of that nature, and how timing and things of that nature. And there's critical paths. We're doing some things now that it's funny on one little thing on a critical path can affect the whole thing. So if you figure, and I remember doing a Gantt chart years ago for an investment or something we were in, and maybe had 130 some odd, if I remember correctly, separate events that were linked to each other. But there's only 12 that if you didn't get them right and get them on time, the whole investment or whole thing would have fallen apart. So obviously critical path is very important. And you could it's funny because I say to some folks who I've hired and who work for me, I said, listen, it's very important in our business to understand you're always juggling. As a COO, our jobs are always, they seem sometimes like a mile wide and 6 inches deep. And so we're always juggling everything from compliance to trade breaks to leverage to prime brokers. There's some maybe, and even sometimes the marketing functions fall under us and investor relations and all kinds of things. But I always tell the folks that sometimes I have a controller working for me, or so I've had a dozen people or so working for me. I said, listen, there's a difference between glass balls and rubber balls, and you're always juggling these balls. So you got to understand the difference between the two. You drop a glass ball, it breaks, something bad's going to happen. I had IT guys working for me as well. They fell under my, so like the server repairs, all this. And then things that we got going on, like trade breaks have to be cleared up in 3 days. Otherwise they go into settlement and problems, trade error, things like that. But rubber balls are things that, all right, if they drop them, you can bounce them and then you can pick them up again and keep juggling them. And so you got to understand the difference between those, and don't let any glass balls drop ever. Because that could have a detrimental effect. So the bottom line is that's just another way of saying prioritizing and understanding what's critical. And engineering gives you that kind of that sense. And system engineering absolutely does that as well, because you understand critical paths, what's critical, what's a glass ball, what breaks. Something is going to be ruined, whatever, it could be an investment or a system or whatever forever and affect the whole firm. Or if it's just not that important, but it still has to get done, that you can circle back around to it and get it done. So, for example, a lot of things I just put on hold to do this interview because they weren't that important, but I will circle back around.
Yeah.
It was critical. I made sure I did it before we were chatting. So those are some things that when I try, and it's so funny because when I went to my first firm, it was called Concordia. It's no longer around. They got bought by somebody. It was a great firm, great place to learn. But there wasn't really a lot of learning. There wasn't a formalized learning process. Some firms you go to, the big firms on Wall Street, they train you, they book classroom, the whole 9 yards for a couple of weeks. They train you very formally. Concordia wasn't like that, and a lot of buy-side firms are not like that. So it was OJT, but I picked up on it and I learned it. But I forgot how many, maybe a couple of months on the job, I was already able to hire someone that worked for me. Maybe it might've been 6 months. Like, Dave, you can hire an assistant, or not an assistant, but somebody who worked for you, not an assistant like an admin, but another back office person to work for me. And the difference was, I remember when I hired somebody, and he was a really good guy. He interviewed a bunch of folks, and we all interviewed him, and I hired a guy. I spent 2 solid weeks training him from 9 a.m. to about 7 p.m. And I did my job in the evening, because I was obviously a bunch of rubber balls, unless they were glass balls. And the reason I did this is because you have this learning curve, and I wanted him to get up that learning curve quickly, because for the first couple of months, you're really like sucking resources as a new employee from your organization. And then you finally start giving back. The break even is about 6 months. You sucked and then you gave back. And if I trained him formally, I could get his curve a little bit steeper, a little bit more front, and so he gave back to the organization more quickly. And I never had that. And he was very thankful that I actually trained him on all these things, everything from, where's the file for, such and such, to here's how you do this. And I thought it was a kind of I really wish I would have had that, and I didn't. And it took me, a little bit longer than it took him, because I gave him that formalized training. And I think that was very important. And it kind of caught on to kind of do more formalized training when we get new employees. And the reason why is because we had one guy earlier literally get up out of his seat, walk out at like 7 or 8 at night, because one of his things, and just was so frustrated that he quit, he quit right there on the spot. And I don't think people realize how costly and what a time sink it is to have to go through the entire interview process to get another employee, because this one broke, so to speak, and quit because he wasn't formally trained, didn't have the guidance and the culture. And so I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want him to quit, and then I have to go through that whole process again. So I put those time, effort, and energy and training into him. And I think it was very worthwhile.
Yeah, I can resonate with that, being at my own businesses or companies now. It's like you want to retain the people that are good. And it seems like the curves apply a lot to your life. Like you talked about a learning curve related to the hiring, but I was going to ask, I'm glad you brought up the example of the balls, right? The glass or rubber. Like, how do you manage, are there practices you have for managing stress? Like, I know you do ultra races, right? And that takes a lot of training in order to endure the suffering you go through in the actual race itself. But do you do any, are you just used to stress at this point that you can manage it well and you focus well with it? Or is there any practices you have with being present to then conquer those well?
Yeah, that's funny. I think it's good for me to burn energy, and do a workout, whether it's a super long bike ride, not super long, but maybe I'll do a 50 or 75-mile bike ride or something like that, or go to the gym and just work out. I try to get my energy burned out, so I don't overreact to certain things. We all have our moments sometimes. Early
in the morning, you try to
Yeah, I usually do it first thing in the morning. Yeah, I get it. Because it just it's funny, because you get the endorphins flowing for the day. I figure I only need 2 cups of coffee instead of 4. If I miss a workout, I need 4. Little things like that. And believe it or not, I do meditate, but not really as often as I should. I know Ray Dalio talks about that. And I really wish I would do it more. I guess I don't wish I should do it more. I should do it more. It's not about wishing, it's about doing. But I think the working out is, I think it was Emerson who said, I'm going to butcher the quote, but health is the first wealth. And so it's important for me to work out, not only just to sustain a good, healthy body, but it also, I think, affects my productivity and my ability to kind of deal with things as they come in throughout the day. And I can certainly notice a difference on days when I miss a workout for whatever reason. I might have an early morning meeting or something like that. I'll miss a workout. I'm not as I don't think I'm as effective. So yeah, that's an important part of my day, which I pretty much work out almost every single day. If I miss one, it's because of something that I prioritized over the workout, which is I don't like doing.
Yeah, that's I like that. The first wealth is health.
Yeah, that's the saying. You got it right. I got it wrong. But
Yeah. I think I have a shirt that says something similar to that. But is there anything you would want to bring up, just like that, maybe top of mind, as we are in a time when the world is actually opening up more, and just anything like you've been marinating over recently, just because I've been asking you a lot of questions, but if you want to just like have the stage free to kind of say anything, because I filled up my jar of questions, and this is definitely an enjoyable, as an understatement, enjoyable conversation. But if there's anything you want to speak on, I would love to give you that room to do so.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, Anthony, and I thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you. And like you said before, I think when I got out of the military, there wasn't a lot of transitional support for folks. Now there's a lot more. In fact, a friend of mine wrote a book, but for folks getting out of the military, there's a lot more transitional support, because I remember getting my first job. I had about 7 to 8 months to kill before going to business school. So I said, I might as well work. And I wasn't going to sit around for 8 months. I probably should have traveled. Now I think about it, traveled more. But I remember interviewing at a place, and it was Capital One, and I'm glad I worked there for it, because it's a great company. And they kind of looked at my resume and kind of like, we don't understand it. And I'm like, just hire me, trust me, I'll show you why. And they were very pleased. I think they were very pleased, because they hired a couple. It was like 4, maybe there's a lot more now. I think it was like 4 ex-military folks at Capital One when I was there.
Wow.
And I remember my boss saying, we like you military people, you GSD. And I said, what does that mean? Get shit done. And they liked it. We got it done. We got it done on time, to standard, high standard. Our high standard is excellence, and just it was. So what I say, I would hope that more and more people would hire ex-military, even though the resume doesn't, line for line show, a perfect transition to what the job is. And if you hire them for their ability to think on their feet, to hire them to their ability to lead and manage people, and those softer skills that aren't, perfectly transitional, they transition well, but they may not be perfectly suited for the role that they're looking for. You can teach them those finite skills in the role, and those other skills will transition over. I think you're going to get a very good quality person, generally speaking. And so I hope to see more of that. I think a lot of firms, GE, for example, have been doing it for decades. They broke the code on that. They're like, hey, get these ex-military folks and don't tell anyone, because they're really valuable folks, and they climb up. And there's a lot of other firms now that do it. It's specifically go after ex-military, and I would encourage more and more firms to do that, because you're going to get a good quality person overall, generally speaking. And those soft skills are going to transition over. You can always teach the hard skills later. So thank you for that forum to plug the ex-military folks out there that are coming into the civilian workforce.
Yeah, of course. That was well said. I like that a lot, and I appreciate this time again. This was definitely worthwhile. People listening, hope you got a lot out of it. Listen back, and if not, because there's a lot of gems. But seriously, I appreciate this.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you got it.